And we are joined here in studio by Micah Edmond, who wants to be the congressman for the 8th Congressional District of Virginia. He wants to take over that seat held by Jim Moran. He's in studio. Thanks for joining us here this morning.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So what makes you think that you're the guy to take over the seat that is currently held by Jim Moran?
Well, I tell you, quite frankly, after 24 years of more of the same, people are looking for something a lot different. They're looking for a real choice. They're looking for a real race where they're not taken for granted. I've been out all over this district so far, and I keep telling people that I'm bringing a new vision, a new voice, and a new energy to making the American dream achievable, and that's something that people are buying into.
Now, you served on Capitol Hill.
Yes, sir.
In addition to having a military background,
yes,
you served on Capitol Hill.
Yes, 8 years as a Marine Corps officer, and I was very much committed to wanting to continue to serve my country. So when I got out, I went over to Capitol Hill and continued to be involved in public service by working with senior members of the Armed Services Committee and the Veterans Affairs Committee.
And you're... Forgive me because it's radio, and let everybody know you're a Jewish black Republican. Another one of those.
Another one of those. I think the biggest shock piece of press that we got was the first profile piece on this race was done by the Washington Jewish Week. So that's a shameless plug, but that was their actual headline: Black Jewish Republican.
I mean, I'm giggling about it, but that's not your typical.
It's rather unusual.
Typical Virginia Republican candidate.
That's very true. There's nothing typical about us.
All right. Well, let's talk about your opponent. Don Beyer, everyone knows his Volvos, but nobody really knows much about him as a politician, I don't think, in terms of what he can bring to the table representing that district. But, you know, I hear people say, listen, this is the real race here was in the Democratic primary. Beyer won it, and so it's his seat to have. What do you say to that?
Well, I'll tell you one thing's very interesting about those comments. One is, I was actually around during those Democratic primaries, and the minority community felt that they were being taken for granted on statements like that. Mr. Beyer and even some of the other Democratic politicians didn't campaign in their communities. I showed up there all the time, so during their own Democratic forums, I was invited to speak because, like I said, they wanted to hear a new vision, a new voice, and a different opinion on things. When you talk about how Mr. Beyer performed, quite frankly, he raised about $1 million+ for that period. And when you look at his performance in the own Democratic primary, he didn't even clear majority. It was 44%. So that right there tells you that he's not their clear favorite.
All right, but it has been a safe Democratic seat for many, many years. How do you overcome that?
Well, I'll tell you, there's one thing is plain and simple, it's an open seat. In an open seat, anything can happen. Two, whether you like Jim Moran or not, Jim Moran has been around for 24 years. He's been in a very powerful committee that's been, quite frankly, a big influencer on jobs in this community. Mr. Beyer doesn't have that experience. He doesn't come to this with the same name ID. When people talk about, oh, well, we all know Don Beyer. Well, the last time he served in political office was about 20 years ago.
Yes.
When you look at his performance in this Democratic primary, he didn't do very well with the younger people who don't know who he is. That's a growing demographic in this district, as well as the minorities. So, secondly, I think when you look at the makeup of this district, A, there's not a list of registered Republicans or Democrats, and two, this district has gotten, I believe, more red and more moderate. Particularly when you look, this district was redrawn after 2010, and we pulled in a significant amount of precincts from the 10th district that Frank Wolf actually won, and a significant amount of districts from the 11th district that Tom Davis won. So they're now in this district right now.
So you believe that the demographics and the lines having changed means that it no longer is a guaranteed Democratic seat?
Absolutely. Not only on the demographics of the constituency, which is about 43% minority and trending more younger than older, I also think that you look at defense, where a lot of these people have their jobs. Don Beyer doesn't represent that.
Yeah, let's talk about defense for a moment, Micah Edmond, because as the nominee for the 8th District, I'm guessing that you see what's going on in the world right now, and because you used to work on the Armed Services Committee, you have pretty strong opinions about how the president and his party are waging the war on terror.
Yes.
Please share.
That's your Joe Biden answer for you right there. One word, yes. Well, quite frankly, when you look at where we are today, the president says that we have a lot of imminent threats around, clear and present danger, some things like ISIS, and he says he doesn't have a strategy. I think it's more than that. Strategy is just essentially finding a way to solve a problem. He doesn't even have any priorities. And that, I think, leaves us without focus. It leaves us adrift. It leaves our allies questioning where we are. It has a sense of uncertainty in America. And people really want to know, what are our priorities? What are we committing to? If you don't have any priorities, then you can't write a budget. You can't come up with that strategy.
What would your priority be as a congressman jumping in? I'm guessing you would want to be on the Armed Services Committee, so you're so familiar with it. What kind of legislation, if you were in the House right now, would you start pushing?
Well, one of the things right off of the bat is we basically miscalculated. And there are a lot of individuals like myself that said defense is absolutely important, not only for this district, but absolutely for the United States. And one of the things was we needed to end sequestration. It's been absolutely killing the companies that provide jobs here, but it's also our government infrastructure up here. And we are now in a budget plan between 15 that has no roadmap for what's next, which means how do we even fight ISIS if sequestration goes back into effect?
Okay, and I get that, but then your colleagues, Ryan on Ways and Means next term and Price on budget are going to say, okay, Micah, fine, you want to end sequestration. We got a budget problem here. What are we going to do?
Well, what we're going to do is step up and enact a 10-year balanced economic plan that people like me have been advocating for that no one wants to step up and honor to. It actually sets priorities, solutions, and it enforces some pain. But it's a necessary pain so that we have the resources to do things like invest in our national infrastructure, our national security, our infrastructure, and our education. So we can do things like tackle this ISIS challenge. We can also do things like step up and counter the aggression in Eastern Europe.
How big is immigration in your discussion in this district that you're campaigning in? I mean, we just read in the newspaper, I think, that a good number of kids who came across the border as unaccompanied minors have ended up in Alexandria schools. There was a story that we talked about earlier today of a hearing over in Arlington where they said, okay, you're an unaccompanied minor. They said, yes, I am. I came here illegally. I want to claim asylum. They said, okay, come back for another hearing in 2018. How is this playing out when you talk to people in the district where you're running for office on the issue of immigration?
Immigration is a very, very, very powerful issue in the district. I hear about it mostly on one particular issue. If you think about immigration as a function of our naturalization process, it's a function of our borders, and it's a function of what do we do with individuals who are in this country who are not in a documented status. That function right there is what I hear about most. When businesses want to know how can they be productive in the United States economy and hire people, but they only want to hire people who are legals. The other day I was actually out campaigning and I came across a woman and she said to me, she says, look, I'm old, I want to hire someone for assistant help, and my preference is wanting to hire, someone who served in the military who's an Iraq or Afghanistan veteran, but all I see coming around are illegals and stuff like that. What can I do? So that issue right there for business employers is how do we get people into some sort of a documented status to be able to work in this country and track people is absolutely important.
Micah Edmond is your Republican nominee for Congress in the 8th District. Of course, that's Jim Moran's former district, or soon-to-be former district. So it's going to be a fun race to watch. And by the way, of course, the Democratic nominee, Don Beyer, is certainly welcome here. We would love to have him.
It is now 8. Thanks for coming. It's 8:15 on WMAL.
And thank you for your service.